you very much. It's very flattering to be called an expert on fisheries. The real experts, sadly, remind me of the supposed experts on Schleswig-Holstein, because we had people like Dick Boddy, Tom Hay, Nigel Spearing, and Helen Samueli, who are no longer with us, and people like Austin Mitchell and John Ashworth, who have retired. And the boat over my shoulder, incidentally, is from Dick Boddy's old constituency in Boston, which is a rather sad indictment of the state of UK fishing after joining the EU. I will briefly run through some of the core elements from the fisheries side of things, fly over what the actual EU negotiators mandate says, and if we've got time, end with a very, very brief anecdote. The core elements, really, and many of these will be familiar to viewers because of the nature of them. Fisheries is the original sin of EU membership. It was a policy grab that was patently wrong, and even at the time it was being negotiated was an embarrassment to the EU diplomats, particularly the Dutch at the time, as they subsequently told the Brits. CFP management itself was subsequently proven to be a complete disaster. I mean, the scale of the dumping, hundreds of thousands of tons of fish, hundreds of thousands of tons of fish being dumped dead back into the sea, the million tons of sand eels, and so on and so forth. That argument is one. Everybody can see that policy has been absolutely disgraceful. Next core element, the status quo, as David said. The status quo means that the UK wins this argument by default, in a sense. UNCLOS, the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, France signed it in '96, did very well out of it because of its overseas territories. The EU signed it in '98, did quite well out of it because of its grab over the 200-mile nautical limit. And now those are coming home to roost. Sorry about that, folks, but that's the way it is. I mean, you're supposed to follow international treaties, aren't you? That's what we're told. A couple of caveats to that. Firstly, it requires that the UK is capable and willing to police its waters. So enforcing the rule of law, catching people might be a bit doing it slowly over time, and suing and deterring by means of the insurers. But we need to be able to enforce it, and we also need to recognise there may be short-term difficulties over officials and protests, and particularly around the Channel Islands. But note, the people who are buying the fish have got a lack of alternative suppliers. That's why the fishermen are trying to get into what were historically UK waters. The EU has already acknowledged that it needs to set aside a very large amount of money to bail out its fisheries, and the UK has scope to sell time to allow the EU to pay off these people. So the fundamental point is that the EU should pay for access. It shouldn't be given as a freebie. Now, what the mandate actually said, very briefly, that fall in section 12 of the directives for the negotiation of a new partnership. It links fisheries into its economic part, so it's not supposed to stand alone. It insists that the measures on exploitation and compensation should be non-discriminatory. And rather tellingly, in section 88, it says the objective of the provisions on fisheries should aim to uphold union fishing activities. In particular, it should aim to avoid economic dislocation for union fishermen that have been engaged in fishing activities in the United Kingdom waters. And 89 should uphold existing reciprocal access conditions, quota shares, and the traditional activities of the union fleet. So basically, it wants to have its cake and to eat it under a system that includes joint control and inspection activities. Now, these are grossly ambitious and clearly undeliverable. So what leeway is there? Well, firstly, in Article 90, it says it's an absolute guarantee, but it says the terms of access to waters and quota shares shall guide the conditions set out in regard of other aspects of the economic part that are in particular of access conditions under the free trade area. So it's not an absolute, but it is a limiting area, which is something which Barnier needs to remember. And I'm sure many members of the council will add. The other thing to note, of course, is that under the mandate and under the agreements itself, this was all supposed to be already done by 1st of July. That was the deadline. The fact it's not been maintained suggests a little bit of bad will on the EU side, with Barnier seeking to use it for political leverage. I will spare you the anecdote unless it comes up in questions.